Everybody, thanks so much for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us on the YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share this interview. If you're listening to us on the radio, we thank you for listening. And if you're listening to us on one of the podcast sites, we also thank you for listening. And again, wherever you're listening, I know you can't do it on the radio, but please like, subscribe, and share if you're listening to us online, whether it's YouTube or one of the podcast sites. We really appreciate it. And sorry to keep saying it, but like I said, we're trying to get it out there. We have somebody that I think is going to bring a lot of important ideas and important conversation in general to the listeners today. This is Dr. Trish Leigh, and she is going to be talking about pornography addiction, and she has an extremely good YouTube channel. I definitely hope that people subscribe and share her videos, and you just can look up her name. It's Dr. Trish, Trish, and it's Leigh. Again, her website is again Dr. Trish Leigh again too, if you want to .com, of course, if you want to look at that too. So Dr. Trish, thanks so much for your time today. This is an important conversation. People really need to listen to this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to dig in and deconstruct and kind of maybe break some ideas that people have. And, I'm here to help people because this is dangerous for people. So I'd love to, let's crack it wide open, right?
So, you could be an extremely mentally strong man and just get pulled in and you can't quit this. It's not like, I guess it's almost like the, alcohol, the cigarette smoke, and all these other things that, once you start, it's extremely hard to stop.
It's harder than anything else. And if you know anybody, you can ask anybody that is struggling with this. And I work with so many people that say, I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I stopped this drug, that drug. They're like, I cannot stop this. People need help to stop this. And the younger the brain's hijacked, the harder it is to stop overall. But that's why I say to people, this is not your fault, but this is your responsibility. And then going back to, creating anxiety and depression, brain fog, it gives people ADHD symptoms. The brain is being fried. Every time you consume pornography, you're deactivating the frontal lobe in the brain. You are frying out the reward center in the brain. The dopamine receptors in the middle of your brain are literally getting fried. That's why you need something more stimulating when you go back, because those receptors aren't working. They're not going, hey, this is so stimulating. They're going, I need double what I used to get to be stimulated. So what has happened now is people have erectile dysfunction, young men, and science proves this too, not to keep going back to science, but these are not my ideas. Science shows, and again, I work with tons of 20-year-olds who go to try to be with an actual woman and then can't get an erection because their brain's so fried out.
So is there an erase? Can that be erased, I guess I should say, if there's a lot of work done, like you said, as far as your responsibility to get better?
Yeah, definitely. You need to rewire your brain. So, I try not to sugarcoat things because it's not an easy process, but it absolutely can be done. What happens is so many people white knuckle it, or they go, I'm not going to watch anymore. And then they sit around waiting for the brain pattern that's pushing them into the screen to unwire. It's not enough. You have to rewire the brain. And I am a big proponent of people purchasing this headband. It's not for me, so this isn't a sales pitch. I have a link, and I am an affiliate, but not that I make that much money. I want the world to know that this headband that you can purchase for $249, it's called Muse, and on my YouTube channel, there's a link to get this 15% off if you want. On my website, I created this little course for $49 so you can learn how to use it, and I call it Brain Training 101. If you put this headband on, it has 5 sensors in the frontal lobe, 2 sensors above your ears, which go into the reward center. You can rewire your brain by yourself each and every day at home. And the people who do that, I'm working with people across the entire world who've purchased this headband and email me that they finally got a handle on this thing. But then, of course, that's part of my comprehensive program. It should be part of anybody's program where they learn the skills too, because you really need to create, and we can talk about this more, but there's aspects of looking into your past, creating new routines in your present so that you can hardwire in the better brain pattern over time.
Do you feel like this is harder in general because we have things like this, but you can't really
Definitely.
see it,
Definitely.
but you saw what it was. So we have the cell phone. You can go on Instagram, Twitter, and I'm 32. I'm
Yeah.
friends with a lot of younger women
Mhm.
and 20s and 30s, and they put tons of pictures of themselves in bikinis. And
Yep.
whether they're really great looking or not, they know how to do the angles, the lighting,
I
and they
know.
look
I
like
know.
goddesses in plain
Yeah.
English.
Hmm.
So for a man, whether you're 20 or 30, it's really hard. And then you can go on Twitter and you can
Yeah,
see
it's I call it
godforsaken
this.
things on that. Go ahead.
Totally. I call it the slippery slope. So people that I work with, when they really want to, when their brains are damaged, honestly, and they really commit to not watching porn at all, they have to stay off the slippery slope. Twitter's a slippery slope, big time. Instagram, for sure. So usually people take a washout period. They just take a break from social media in and of itself. And
Right.
then if and when, I want people to put it back in, they have to put it back in a healthy way. And it's funny because people will, not funny, but ironic, I guess, that people will comment to me, like, stop these women from posting all these pictures of themselves in bathing suits. Like, this thing runs so deep, we could be here talking about it for a week, you and I, for sure. Like, because women are being validated for that from the hypersexualized culture and that men have going. So women are learning this is how they can get the attention that they so desire on the inside by using their outside. So like, it's everywhere. So you really have to guard yourself against it if you want to get out from underneath it. Not an easy task. You put commercials on. It's like sex sells everything.
Yeah.
The weirdest things ever are sexualized in commercials.
So does this, and for people that are just starting to listen, this is Dr. Trish Leah. And if you want to go to our website again or our YouTube channel, you can just type it in, Dr. Trish Leah on YouTube and drtrishleah.com on her website. I think it's definitely valid. And again, for people, we all go through this. It's not something that you need to hide. It's, everybody's watched this. And again, like, unless you're a liar.
Yeah,
So,
and I've got no judgment, just so people know, if you haven't watched any of my videos, this isn't a moral discussion to me. It's a neurological. And I shared before we jumped on here that, the reason that I'm here, my background is I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. I have a lot of degrees, educationally speaking. I've had a private practice for 10 years where I offer brain-based therapies for people with brain damage. So long story short, it was probably like 5.5 years ago, porn stumbled into my lap. This problem landed in my lap. And I'm like, what is this, porn? Like, if you asked me before that, I didn't care at all. Like, you asked me about porn, I'm like, whatever, like, who cares? Like, never thought about it, never put any energy.
yeah.
But the person in front of me was literally about to lose their entire life. And if it, and I can explain that in a second, but
Sure.
for many people who consume pornography over 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and that this is going to be happening to, if right now you've watched porn for 5 years, 20 years from now, you're going to be worse, not better. That's just the way that it goes when it comes to brains. But, this person was about to lose their job, their family, they couldn't think, they had massive anxiety, depression, erectile dysfunction, and they're
Wow.
45 years old. So when that hit me, I'm like, what is this? And I dug in for 3 years. I learned everything. I trained under the leading professionals in the world. And when I learned how all these factors come together, I'm like, I'm here for this. And I made one YouTube video, this is how my YouTube channel started. YouTube served it up to millions of people without me even knowing.
Wow.
And I get this email, your video has been viewed 500,000 times. I'm like, what video? And because I had brain videos out there for like 5 years that like still 2,000 people have seen. And I'm like, thank God, it resonated with people. And since then I have millions of viewers, and I'm helping people all over the world.
So is this mainly a male problem, or do you deal with female clients too?
Yeah, I have female clients, but honestly, it's mostly a male problem. So, speaking about demographics, my demographic is 99% is males 18 to 34. And so like, this is pervasive. This is I believe, I know it is actually the biggest problem we have in the world for young men and for older men, but young men in particular. I work with so many 20-year-olds who have erectile dysfunction, which gives them massive anxiety. So they've never had sex with anybody. All they know is porn sex, and we can break down the differences, if you want to, but the reality is, you're a fourth wall observer when you're watching porn. It's not even real in the first place, and it's not the experience you deserve. And now if you can't get an erection to be with a cutie that you're interested in developing a relationship with, like, that is really bad for young men. Young men are dropping out of college because their brains don't work. They can't get through their classes. I mean, you could just look at the comments on my YouTube channel. You don't even need me to tell you. There's comments, young man after young man, that says, what am I going to do about school? How can I get through school?
Yeah. Well, you talked about the sexualized culture too, Dr. Trish. And my thing is with that, we see, and I have another good friend that this happened to, and I want to talk about this story because I think this is another issue. OnlyFans. So we have girls that look great. Again, we talked about the Instagram issue. They go on OnlyFans. And I think this goes to, people that you're working with. They're so sucked into the pornography, and they may even know this girl and they want to see the girl naked and they
Okay,
can't
so
get.
yeah, this is great. So
Yeah,
let
go
me
ahead.
start back at square one, if this is okay, because this
Sure,
is a
go
really
ahead.
good point. Square one is that none of this is about sex, just so you
Right.
know. So when people go to pornography, and person after person, man after man will tell me this, plus there's the science. They're going there to offset anxiety and boredom, usually anxiety. It's called mood regulation. So porn's not used as a sexual outlet. Looking at pictures, it's not even about sex. It gives your brain the dopamine hit that takes the edge off your anxiety.
You're
So
right. Yeah.
basically, you're using OnlyFans or porn or Instagram or Twitter as an anxiety med. It's like you popped an anxiety med. So I want you to remember that next time you're like, maybe I'll just go on Twitter for a minute, because I want you to think to yourself, this is what I'm challenging you and your listeners to think about, or encouraging you. What's the why? What's the why behind it? The why is anxiety med. At the other core of this issue is hypersexuality. And so hypersexuality, we live in a hypersexual culture, but when someone discovers porn early on, and sex becomes the way that they take the edge off of anxiety, they develop hypersexuality from the inside out. That's why I say it's an inside out problem. So they look for sex everywhere because it's the thing that calms them down in the world.
So when
So
you talk, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that the two ways out is to find a new healthy way to regulate your mood. Find a healthy way to take the edge off of stress and anxiety and boredom by getting engaged in your life. And then you have to develop healthy sexuality, which you might not even know what that is. In this past month or these past few weeks, I've made some videos talking about this is hypersexuality, this is healthy sexuality. And those are the two ways out. Figuring out how to have healthy sexuality and coming up with a good, healthy way to reduce your stress and boredom.
So I want to get into this because you just brought up a good point. So, when we talk about, and I've saw these videos up on different channels on YouTube in general, and they talk about flapping. And I want to talk about that because, I've come to, know this, and I know other people have come to know this. When they do that, you get that dopamine hit. And then once it's released, you feel like a loser and a total, basically a total loser in general. So
Yeah,
is that
that's the
what you're saying?
cycle. So both pornography consumption and masturbation
Mhm.
have a cycle of addiction, really. So just to back it up one step too, is that what all this is actually now classified as a disease. But disease to me is dis-ease, lack of ease in the nervous system or in the brain. So it's classified as a disease. It's called compulsive hypersexual behavior disorder. Looking for too much sex all the time, basically. And the number one way it manifests is pornography consumption and masturbation. Number one way. So when somebody masturbates, it's the same thing. It's not for a sexual experience, it's to regulate their mood. So many people that I work with, actually are more addicted to masturbation than they are to pornography. So they can leave porn behind. And then I'm working with them to help them to regulate their brains and to feel okay existing in the world without having to masturbate to get that dopamine hit. And the reason that then it's a cycle, it's literally a cycle. So at the top of the cycle is a stressor or a trigger or just life or habit. So you get triggered into going, maybe I'll masturbate. When you think you're going to masturbate, you already start getting drips of dopamine. I call it dopamine dripping. It starts dripping into your brain because you're like, yeah, I'm going to masturbate. I'm going to feel better in a few minutes, a few hours for some people. So then as that drip starts, it moves to the dopamine flood as you finish masturbating. But then guess what happens? Either within hours or definitely within days. And I can see this in people's brain performance. We can talk about that if you want, because I can see what people's brains are doing using technology. But after the fact, dopamine goes extra low and cortisol, the stress hormone, goes up. Mm-hmm. So now you feel worse. And this whole cycle is built on shame. We know this from the science. Shame is what drives people towards porn and masturbation. They feel shameful about themselves, something in their past, or just about sexuality in the first place. That goes back to creating healthy sexuality. You don't have any shame, and now you can walk tall. And in the end, to break this cycle, you have to live a life of dignity and integrity. You have to, or the shame's still there.
So is this mostly that the masturbation and the pornography, is this mostly like I know you said about people with the shame, is it more dedicated to somebody that's been like mentally abused, verbally abused, sexually abused? These are the people that mostly are triggered toward this kind of lifestyle and really falling into bad habits in general?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, I already recorded a video that comes out next Monday, I think, on 2 different types of pornography or masturbation addiction or compulsion. And old school, and where this line is in terms of age, but for older people, one type is classic, old school. Like, they found their dad's Playboy magazines, but their brain was hijacked different. So for middle-aged people or older, it's a more classic type of compulsion, meaning that there is trauma. And those people, trauma's there like 99% of the time. Verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, just neglect, family dysfunction for sure. So the driving force, old school, definitely. New school, usually there's still some family dysfunction, and this is contemporary porn and masturbation addiction, like new, younger people. But it's more so because now in the day and age of high-speed internet, like we already talked about, it can jump up in front of you and hijack your brain without you looking for it. In the past, it was when there was trauma going on. And to just answer your question too, so there are these 2 different types that work a little bit differently, but there can be like a driving force in there that feeling the need to control sexual experiences. And that's why, you can control masturbation, you can control the screen. If you're with another person, there's less control, less risk of self-rejection. There's really some elements in both types there.
I was always thought that if you really, if you started masturbation at a young age, you're going to develop the ED regardless, correct?
Usually, unfortunately. Yeah. But it's like so pornography is what's called a supernormal stimulus. I don't know if you've heard this before. Actually, James Hetfield, who's from Metallica, he made a movie called Chasing the Cardboard Butterfly, I believe it's called. So anyways, because the cardboard butterfly effect is that they did this butterfly study where they painted, butterflies are beautiful in the first place. They painted butterflies with these brighter colors, and all the male butterflies wanted to mate with the painted butterflies. Right. So meaning that because it's super normal, it doesn't exist in the world. And like you said, camera angles and all that, people look far more amazing than they are. So then it includes fantasy. There's an element of fantasy that keeps this force going. So the point about that is the supernormal stimulus is what fries the brain out. So let's just say you started masturbating when you're 10, but you're just doing it like you're staying in your body, as I call it when I'm trying to tell people if you have to masturbate, the way to do it in a healthy way, but it's kind of like eating chocolate a lot in a healthy way, like it's loaded for sure. But so is to stay in your body. So if you just stayed in your body and you didn't have all this fantasy, and if you didn't have the super normal stimulus of porn, it would not be as damaging for the brain. That super normal stimulus is the thing that makes the dopamine flood at 2, 3, 5 times the level. That's what fries the brain out.
So you talked about that device that you work with people with. And I know you said the masturbation is really the bad. I mean, obviously we shouldn't be watching porn, but the masturbation really kills everything. It's like, so are you saying that if somebody put that device on for whatever amount of time it would be, they would get rid of those feelings to do the masturbation and pornography in general?
Yeah, yes and no. Like it's not a magic device, can't put it on and, but what happens is it teaches your brain to make more of optimal processing speed. So at the core of all this stuff is hyper arousal. Your brain is cranking way too fast. That's what gives you stress and anxiety. Or if your brain's cranking way too slow, you're bored and you need to be stimulated. So those patterns that are out in the extremes of brain performance, those are the driving forces into the screen. And that's why people want to watch porn or masturbate. So what that headband does is it's a teaching device. It doesn't put anything into your brain. But when you start using it daily, it starts toning down those stressed out and bored brain patterns and starts increasing your ability to feel calm and focused. And so now the reason it's really important is because some people learn the strategies that they need to implement to be able to stop watching porn and masturbating, but their brain can't do it because their brain's so jacked up, basically. So this basically creates the brain pattern that can then do the strategies that need to be done. So really, it does have to be included in a comprehensive program where you train your brain, then you learn all the strategies to put in place so that you can succeed in the long run. But for the missing piece is brain training for people who've tried, because I talk to people all the time and they'll say to me, what's the difference between your program and other programs? Because I've tried 5 other programs and I've failed. And I say, I don't know what you tried, but if you haven't tried brain training, that's one missing piece, because if your brain's so far out in the extremes and you try to go use these programs, you can't, because your brain literally can't use the program. So you have to get your brain back in the middle, then do a program, and then you can succeed.
We never talked about this. And again, for people that are listening, this is Dr. Trish Leigh. Again, it's drtrishleigh.com. And it's also that on YouTube, Dr. Trish Leigh. We never talked about this, but I do want to get this in the interview. What made you want to specialize in, actually, I guess you did say that because you said it was somebody close to you, right?
Yeah. And it's pretty wild because I would never thought I would be interested in this, but now I'm literally never going away because this is the truth, that my friend went to psychotherapists, doctors, spent tens of thousands of dollars and was getting worse. Wow. So of course I'm freaking out because I don't want him to get worse. I want him to get better. And so obviously I'm poised in a position to figure this out because I am a cognitive neuroscientist. I know how to figure things out. So anyways, that's why I dedicate myself to figuring it out. I got trained by the highest people in this field, which now I'm certified as a sex addiction recovery coach, and I work with partners. But this is the important point, is that when I figured it out, I helped my friend in just a couple months. Wow. After years of, first of all, struggling with pornography addiction and all these mental health thinking and sexual problems that he had for years. And then it got worse and worse as he sought help. So I figured it out, and no joke, he was out of the woods in just a couple months. And that's why I put it into a program. And that's why I made the YouTube videos, because I felt like I was sitting on this secret that every person out there needs. And so I've established a nonprofit organization, which the paperwork's going to take till the end of the year to get up and running. But you know how that goes, bureaucracy, but especially in COVID-19. Yeah. But the point about that is that I plan on making sex ed, a digital program for sex ed in high schools to teach young kids to prevent this thing for the next generation. I already have programs for people to get them out of it. And we're going to work with religious organizations, get them a digital program, because so many people go to their church leaders or someone who they feel like they can trust, and they're given all the wrong advice.
Yeah, I want to tell you, I appreciate you doing that personally. And I'm not just saying that because we're talking, because I went to Catholic school my whole life and they don't teach you a damn thing about sex. And then you end up watching pornography to learn about sex because you don't know what the hell to do. And it's taboo to talk about that, within the family for most families. So I appreciate you doing that because that's how people get, a lot of people get addicted to sex because they don't know what they're doing and they watch the pornography, and that's how they treat women like crap in plain English
Definitely.
because they rely on this bad thing. So I appreciate you doing that. I
Yeah.
think it's a great.
Yeah, thanks. I have 6 kids. I don't know if you know that about me.
No.
So like, I'm like, I started talking to them, even though it's uncomfortable. Now they all work for me in my Porn Brain Reboot company. And we use the word porn much too much around here these days because we're all on the same, page. But the point is like, they all have boyfriends and girlfriends. And so now, I think 10 years ago, I think it's a huge blessing for me and a gift for me, because if I wasn't in this position right now, I'd be telling my kids not to have sex. My kids are 18, 17, like they're becoming sexual beings. Not that I want them to have sex, but I definitely don't want them watching porn. I want them to develop the desire to have sex with other people. So it's changed the conversation for us, which hopefully that's going to change, tons of things for them that if it would have been different 10 years ago.
I think that's great, seriously, because like it is a real problem. I know a lot of friends, as far as guys that really, have watched porn, like I said, to learn how to have sex, and they don't know how to do it. They could be like 20 or 30. They don't know how to do it correctly. Or the girl gets pissed off. She doesn't want to do this. And the guy says, hey, well, I saw this in a video. And they say, well, I don't want to be treated like this shit in plain English.
And if I can share something from some new studies, because you know how I love me some science, is that there's a new, and you'll like this though, is that the 5 acts that are in mainstream porn. So I always forget what the last one is: choking, gagging, hair pulling, spanking, and slapping. There's one more that's just in mainstream pornography, that when you watch porn, that basically 100% of the time, the woman responds with a positive or neutral response to being hit. So what happens is neurally, guys' brains are going, chicks like this, girls like this. They like to be hit. They like to be gagged. You know what I mean? But it's not their fault. Again, like, I think some people don't like me because I'm not judgy, but like your brain literally got trained to do that by the worst sex educator ever. So the way out is to realize that is fake. Real women do not like that. Real women want to have fun and engaging erotic. Erotic's a word I use a lot, or sensual. Erotic and sensual sex with another human being is awesome. But, violent sex where one person is using the other person as an object of pleasure, it's objectification is what it's called. You're just using that person as an object if that's what you're doing. That's not healthy sex for anybody, not for you, but your brain's been trained to want it from porn.
Yeah, it's really, there is some real sick shit in plain English on the internet as far as that goes. So.
Oh yeah, and it goes in edging, and I don't know if you've seen my video on edging. My video on edging is probably like the 2nd most viewed one out there, and everybody I talk to is like, I saw your video on edging. I do that. Edging is basically like, opening multiple tabs, sometimes in the very large numbers. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. And then moving from one to the next in increasing intensity and getting into, more intense and off the chart stuff. And again, recognizing it's your brain telling you to do that. Your brain set you up to go from lower levels to higher levels to escalate or edge that. You go to the edge of where the dopamine's flowing, and then you raise that threshold. Then you linger at that edge and you raise that threshold. And guess what you're doing? Frying your reward center, literally damaging those dopamine receptors. That is the #1 reason for erectile dysfunction right there, that practice.
So I want to talk about this in general because, we talk about how to get rid of this habit. Obviously, you talked about the headband. But there's obviously other routes to, get rid of this. I know you do have a couple of coaching procedures that you use, of course. If you want to go in depth about what you do personally or what people can obviously do in general.
Yeah. So the way that I built the program that I built through the nonprofit that I established is it's all on science, wink, wink. But so, and the reason I care about that is because it's proven to work. So an old school approach to addiction and sex addiction is what we're talking about here, hypersexuality. The old approach is it's a biopsychosocial approach. You look at your biology, not necessarily your brain. Usually in the old school, that means you look at your families. Addictions run in families, basically. So you're looking at your propensity, or you're set up in the first place to be more at risk to get addicted to something. And so like a lot of times, even pornography addiction runs in families. Like kids get it because their father was into it, even if he never told their kids. It is multi-generational transmission is what it's called. Then there's psychological issues like anxiety, depression, or ADHD there in the first place, pushing the brain in, and then social, who your social community is. So those things have to be changed. And that is part of my program. And then the neuro part is neuromodulation, making your brain work differently. But long story short, and again, I have a video on YouTube saying this to people, you don't have to work with me, but find a program that includes these pieces. And I call it a 3x3 approach, which mine is. The 3 is you have to unwire, rewire, and hardwire your brain. You have to unwire the porn brain pattern that's driving you in, because porn damages your brain. So you have to stop watching porn and let that pattern go away. Then you have to rewire in the optimal pattern. And we do that through brain training, through changing your routines. So it can be easy things like working out or reading or creating a morning meditation or a morning routine. But usually it's like learning, and this is what I teach people, how to use your brain well across your day. And, I balance my brain like this so that I can be an optimal performer. My program's an optimal peak performer program with the benefit of leaving porn. You have to figure out how not to watch it and how not to masturbate, because your brain will be jonesing for it if it needs the dopamine. So we set up a defensive program, but then the other is past, present, and future. Those are the other 3s. So if there is trauma or dysfunction, you have to resolve it. A lot of people don't do that. So it can be as easy as, not getting the attention that you needed when you were a kid, or there is a traumatic event, or, if you went to Catholic school, and I grew up Catholic school teaches shame around sexuality. So you might just have shame in the first place, where you have to undo that a bit and go, you know what, being sexual as an adult is evolutionarily natural. It's right. It's okay. There's no shame. And then you can get your groove on in a healthy way. Seriously. So then, that's undoing those patterns and creating new ones, mental processes, feelings. You have to feel. Usually I talked about mood regulation at the core. And I encourage listeners to think about this, because this is a takeaway action step. I know I like having an action step once I listen to something. Is next time you think you want to watch porn or masturbate, try to pause for a minute, peel the layers back from the sexual feelings, because those are fake. It's not about sex. Peel the sexual feelings away and see what you're actually feeling. It's usually a feeling of discomfort. And so porn and masturbation are to give you comfort, because you have an uncomfortable feeling. You have discomfort. It's stress from work. You just had a fight with your girlfriend. Something uncomfortable is happening. Uncomfortable feelings only last 90 seconds. If it lasts any longer for you, you're replaying it in your mind. And then that's what happens. And that's what drives you back in. So you can learn how to not, first of all, feel the feeling in the first moment, and then go take an action step to solve it. So if you owe somebody 20 grand, go pay them $100. At least start moving in the right direction instead of escaping. So there's lots of pieces to put together, but it's not an easy fix. It's not like throw this headband on, bada bing, bada boom, you're done.
Again, for people that are listening, Dr. Trish Leigh, again, drtrishleigh.com, or on YouTube also. So, going back to COVID, how is COVID, because I've had a couple other therapists on here from all over the country in general, and their practices are sky high right now with participation. People are out of control as far as anxiety. I know you do everything in the kitchen sink, whether it's anxiety, ADHD, or porn addiction. So how has COVID, I guess I'll frame it this way, affected porn addiction? I'm sure it's went sky high because people have been locked down at home.
Sky high.
And
Mhm.
anxiety in general. Have you had a lot of anxiety issues with people too?
Oh yeah, through the roof, unfortunately. And again, we
Yeah.
know from the statistics that porn use is up. I forget what it is now, but it's massively high. And unfortunately, the porn industry has taken advantage of that. Right when COVID hit, they opened up more, worse across the world. India, in particular, like didn't have some access, and they opened more access. And India is in a pickle right now. I work with a lot of people in India because everybody's locked down, everybody's sick, stress is so high, and this really is the fastest way to take the edge off. So it's through the roof. And I just made a video not long ago when the world started to open up a little bit. Who knows what'll happen moving into the fall, but when it
Yeah.
opened up, people were really struggling more with withdrawal symptoms. Think about this one, how wild that is, because use went up so much during COVID. And the use, as long as you're in the cycle, and especially early in the cycle, and this is a different thought, but it's an interesting one, I think. Early in the cycle, like let's say you've only watched porn for 5, 6, 7 years. If you're in the cycle and it's not that tight yet and it's not that intense yet, people think it's good for them. And I hear that all the time, like, it really is serving me. I'm working better than I've ever worked. I don't feel stressed out. I'm cranking because of, porn helps me to crank. And originally it might, because it's giving you that dopamine and you really haven't gotten to these astronomical levels yet. So during COVID, people are going from that kind of like casual or more casual use to this all the time, all day, every day use, really frying their brains out fast within a 9-month time frame. Then the world starts to open up a little bit. People have to come out of their homes and go back to work. And so this is what, to put it in a frame of reference for a couple stories, a lot of guys tell me they're on Zoom and they have to fight with themselves not to open up porn on their phone during a meeting, because they can't get through one meeting without watching porn, because their brain's been conditioned to get a dopamine hit every hour. And then if they go back into the world and don't watch porn, they're angrier than ever. So anxiety through the roof, porn use through the roof. Then as we start to integrate back into the world, angry, irritable people who can't think. And it's terrifying, I think.
What other issues are you hearing as far as mental health issues throughout COVID that you've, had clients deal with?
Yeah, they're all up, just so you know. A number
Yeah.
one, which this is a really interesting one, health anxiety. That's a new diagnostic category. And basically it directly relates to porn use. So this is how it goes. You watch a ton of porn and now you have more anxiety than ever. And your heart's racing and you have panic attacks in the night. And your blood pressure's off. So you go to your doctor and you have all those things checked out, and all of them check out fine, but you're not fine. So you go home and you've got gastrointestinal problems. Your stomach's killing you all the time. Health anxiety is the number one thing that is like a new phobia or a new OCD type of behavior, because people really feel awful and they can't trace it back to porn use. I have this on my list of videos to make: health conditions you don't trace back to porn use. And it's basically all of them, you can have stomach problems, you can have heart problems, you can have ADHD. People go to their doctors and they get diagnosed with adult ADHD. That's not a thing. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. You can only get it, be born with it, basically.
Yeah.
So people have all these health problems. So health anxiety is the number one phobia. Then they sit around, people, thousands, hundreds of thousands probably, sit around worrying about their health, looking it up online, not being able to find an answer because they don't know it has to do with their porn use.
So did this just start through COVID? Is that what you're saying?
It was beginning. It's been around, but it's hitting a critical mass because of COVID, because of so much more porn use.
Yeah.
People feel so much worse. Plus anxiety's actually been normalized. So anxiety used to be, before COVID, it's that person has anxiety, that person has anxiety disorder. Now everybody has anxiety and most people have anxiety disorder. So it's been normalized. But what hasn't been normalized is people who really worry about their health all the time in an unhealthy, compulsive OCD type of manner. And that definitely is becoming much more prevalent during COVID.
That really makes me think about something, but I'll end the interview and because I have a question about that on you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
let's get to it.
And can I just
Yeah.
answer what you said about agoraphobia? Is like social anxiety is a number one way that porn use manifests. Also, it goes back to shame.
Yep.
Because when you have shameful behaviors, the difference between shame and guilt is I'm doing something bad that I don't like. Shame is I'm a bad person. So when you feel like you're a bad person, you can't go talk to other people and look them in the eye, and you feel weird about interacting. Plus your brain's not working. And the reward of talking to another person, your brain isn't getting it because those reward centers are fried. Your frontal lobe can't come up with your frontal lobe's for socialization. It can't come up with the things to say, which gives people this massive performance anxiety. So it's harder and harder and harder to go out, especially, the way it's COVIDed out there. It's harder to go out. So people are suffering from social anxiety. Again, if you look on my YouTube channel, it's so cool because people go, at the end of every video, I have what I call a brain tip, a strategy for people to use. And people write on the YouTube channel, I'm using your strategies. I just went out, I met this girl, we're going on a date. And I'm like, good for you, man, because brought his brain back online and is able to now approach a person that they're interested in, try to develop intimacy and connection, not just jump into a sexual situation. Pretty cool. But social anxiety comes from porn use many times.
I'll ask my question, but let's finish off with the last two questions. So,
Mhm.
My question is, well, first, let's talk about some of your programs. So you do the neuro-coaching and obviously the neurofeedback experts.
Mhm.
If you want to just talk a little bit about those before I ask the last question.
Sure. So this is what I tell people if you're looking for help. I built a 90-day program that's a digital program, and that's actually on my Porn Brain Reboot. If you hit the Porn Brain Reboot tab on Dr. Trish Leigh, it takes you through to the nonprofit, the digital programs. There's a small one, which is very affordable, thousands of people in it, a lot of people in it, small, medium, large programs. If you have a big problem, you need the large program. And if you have a small one, it's an introductory, So in the large program, you can add a group with me. We have group meetings every week. I get on, I personally walk you through the digital content. So you can do it by yourself, but have my support. But then if you want individual support, I offer home neurofeedback, which is higher level brain training that's customized to you. I customize it. And I work with you personally to make sure you succeed. And so the reality is, if you have all the tools and strategies at your fingertip and you have me walking you through them, you come out of this thing. And so that's how I'm here to help people. And then if you don't struggle with pornography and you only struggle with anxiety or ADHD, which is enough, then you can join my personal neuro-coaching and neurofeedback program. And people succeed because I optimize their brain, give them the tools to live well and use their brain well, and they can come out of anxiety and ADHD too.
Even to go into that, because a lot of people push pills that are not therapists, I guess they're psychiatrists. They push pills on people where, some people may need these. I will give them that. And some people don't. And they don't know what they need, but they listen to this person. They go on pills, on pills, on pills, on top of pills in general.
I
So,
know. And
so
usually it makes people worse,
right.
unfortunately.
And obviously every pill has different side effects, so you don't really know what the heck you're doing. So it goes back to what you were saying about these health conscious people and, they go to the doctors, nothing's wrong, they're healthy. And then maybe their psychiatrist gives them pills and then, they're taking all these pills. So
Yep.
do you, push against that and say that,
I
go ahead.
get where people are. So like, I do not like pills. So to give you the easy answer, pills are zero solution. They don't solve anything. We know that, but they are a Band-Aid. So if you're bleeding out, what's the first thing you need? You need a bandage, man, right? So they can be a Band-Aid for people, but I help a lot of people wean off of their medications. I can see what their brain is doing. Whenever I work with anybody individually, I can absolutely see using EEG, electroencephalogram. I can see how your brain is performing. So I know when to advise you to reduce medications. Of course, you have to go back to your prescribing doctor because that would be ethically you need to, but I can give you the information you need to make that choice wisely. But, so I tell people, if you're suicidal, talk about things that are up during COVID, suicidal ideation from porn use. So like if you have these really bad mental health issues, you need to stop the bleeding. And a Band-Aid, all the medication does 99% of the time lowers the power in your brain. So you don't feel the suffering that it's causing. It does not optimize the brain. It just lowers the power, takes the edge off of the symptoms that your brain pattern is creating for you. So if you got to do that in the short run, you do it. But the long-term solution is to optimize your brain, which absolutely can be rewired to work better. It's neuroplasticity. It's called Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. The way that you make them fire together is how you end up living your life. You can fire them together for anxiety. You can fire them together for lack of focus. You also can rewire your brain. So now these neurons fire together for calm focus. That's what I do with and for people.
Dr. Trish Leigh here on Fire Breathing Rob. Again, definitely check her out. It's Dr. Trish and then leigh.com, or you can go on the YouTube like we've been speaking about. As we end the interview, my question is first, we're going to talk about, I guess, some bad stuff in the last question and some good stuff, because I want you to give the viewers some hope. There's a lot of mental health issues going on right now. There's a lot of people suffering due to COVID. Are you worried about a mental health crisis in this country if it's not already happening? Because you did talk about male suicide. I know it's up sky high right now. And also, after you discuss that with some hope for the viewers about, defeating this.
Yeah, that's why I said to you, I don't like using words like it's terrifying, but it is terrifying. I think porn consumption is terrifying because people are using it with no warning and they don't know they're damaging their own brains. Like, at least if you take drugs, if you're using heroin, you're damaging your brain. If you watch porn, you don't know that it's actually more damaging than heroin, literally. So yes, we are at crisis and it is going to get worse. But here's the hope part. And people tell me all the time, like, if you feel hopeless, please watch my YouTube videos, because I'm here. Literally, my job is to give you hope, because you are a powerful being. You have everything you need inside of you, in your brain, to overcome pornography use if you want to. I'm not here to convince anybody. Well, maybe I am, I guess, a little too. At least inform them and educate them how damaging it is. But, if you want to, neuroplasticity is on your side. And if you're under the age of 26 as a man, 28 actually as a man, 26 for women, you have development on your side. So whenever I talk to 20-year-olds who are in a really bad spot, I'm like, dude, not only do you have neuroplasticity, you have neurodevelopment on your side. You're going to be okay. But you need to rewire your brain. So I am a pragmatic optimist. I'm not going to give anybody false hope. I am going to give you hope, saying, if you want this, you can rewire your brain. You can take the steps that you need to. And in 90 days, for many people, you can be done with this thing. If you're really sucked in, it might take you a year or two. But in the journey, this is the way I talk about it. If you engage with the materials that I create on YouTube, even, and especially if you're in my 90-day program, if you engage in it, you evolve. And when you evolve as a human being, you're literally creating better brain pattern from the inside out, which is going to get you better behaviors, which gets you better outcomes, and your whole life improves. But you got to make some changes. So when people put on my YouTube channel, they're like, I'm going for it, I'm gonna leave porn behind. I'm like, change something. So you can make these changes, and you are a powerful, powerful being on the inside. Your brain has everything it needs to heal itself. People forget we are self-healing. What happens when you get a cut?
Yeah.
It heals itself. You are a powerful being. And so I call neurofeedback, I have for 10 years at least, I call neurofeedback stitches. Brain training is stitches. It's bringing your brain back to the point where it can heal itself. So my program is one that teaches you to heal yourself. You have the power to do this. And if you don't want to get into a program, start by watching the YouTube videos, get the brain training headband. It will cost you very little in the grand scheme of things, because you're a powerful being. You can heal yourself.
Dr. Trish Leigh, again, drtrishleigh.com or on YouTube. Thanks so much for your time. And I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here. No problem.